Sorry if I freak out on you a little.
Don't worry. I'm very excited to meet you.
So I'll never leave here. Do I have to finish out the day, or can I skip out now? Well, boss, guess this is the part where I should tell you to go to hell. Except you're already here.
Lastly, Helly's resignation request was denied.
Yeah, no, that can't be right. My Audi wouldn't do that. I am a person. You are not.
Excuse me, Helly.
Jesus, Helly!
I want a camera! You're going to give me a video camera so I can tape a resignation to my Audi, or you're going to have to explain to her why she's missing 4 fingers. I could not, with a razor to my throat, be less interested in being your family. Mark, I don't want to work here with you. So don't burst into the bathroom with your pathetic boss voice on and try to convince me that I do.
Remember, you're gonna be looking at this every day. Helly, what are you doing?
Oh, I just think I'm not gonna work here anymore. Sorry.
What do you mean?
I quit. We're not the same, actually. Us and the Outties were not. And speaking for myself, I don't think we owe them shit.
Welcome back, decorated Lumon employee. So, today I wanted to touch on a few other theories I had after the most recent episode of Severance. This whole episode was filled with seeds that I think were planted to paint out the rest of the series as we go on, depending on how many seasons it gets. In my last video, I talked about why Cobell could have been walking away and how Milkshake's gift could actually be a big indicator towards Kier's existence as a whole. Now today, I wanted to bring up a couple more scenes that really piqued my interest. We're gonna start today's theories off with the scene between both Natalie and Ricken. This scene was super interesting. Anytime Natalie's on screen, given how she's been portrayed as the representation for the board and Lumon as a whole, seeing her this involved within Devon's home life is very unsettling. Now throughout the scene, we could see that both Natalie and Ricken had been discussing revisiting Rickens book in some way and making some alterations to better fit their Innie audience, who Ricken knows is a big fan of his work. Why would they want to make any alterations to a seemingly random book? Because that book has been heavily implemented within the show. Arguably, the OTC event, the event where all the Innies decided to take control of their Outties and try to figure out what was going on outside of Lumon, wouldn't have started without Rickens' book being left for the Innies to read. But the Innies weren't the only ones to read the book. Milchik also took a look at it, and while he did initially seem to laugh it off, I think given the context of the most recent episode with his paintings as gifts, and the fact that the computer he was working on never switched to his name and was stuck on Miss Cobell, should indicate that he's even left out of the loop in some of these bigger Lumon projects. What I mean by that is, I think Natalie talking to Ricken is something that very few Lumon employees know about, maybe not even Helena. I think this is something specifically between Natalie / the board and how they want to interact with the Innies as a whole. See, this book was very influential, and to Innies who haven't been subjected to a lot of forms of art in the outside world, most of the words that transpired within this book were very empowering to them, as these concepts were very foreign to them as a whole. While some of us can read his work and find that it's definitely the product of a very ingenious wordsmith, others might read it and find a lot of value to take away, hence the Innies. Who's to say that Milkshake didn't also take something away? It's easy to laugh something off and ignore the value that's placed directly in front of your face. Could he have been subconsciously affected by this book to maybe start turning against Lumon as well? But what alterations could Natalie want to make with the book as a whole? What I'm thinking is that the alterations being made will make it so that the Innies or anyone who reads it will develop a sort of devotion or faith in either Lumon or Kier as a whole. I think that whole event with Rickens' book in the first season opened up Lumon's eyes into realizing how impressionable the Innies actually were. Potentially implementing a new faith to Innies through the works of Rickens' new altered book could lead to Innies or workers who are so devoted, not even the events that turned Irving could make them want to waver in regards to working for Lumon.
But who's to say Rickens' book hasn't already been tampered with? See, if you go back to season 1, you can see that when Ricken and Devin are dropping off the book for Mark, they end up deciding to leave it on Mark's front porch. And as soon as they pull away, Miss Cobell leaves her home and walks on over. Now, if you notice the scenes that followed throughout the episode, Miss Cobell has no problem searching through someone's personal privacy. See, while Mark was away, she had not only broken to his home and started snooping around, but she also stole a candle that had belonged to Gemma. Yet, when she arrives at work and hands the book over to Milchick to check it out, the book is still wrapped for some surprising reason. Is it possible that she had altered the book in some way and planted the seeds of the Innies rebellion rather than Ricken himself? It would explain the juxtaposition between some of the words being pretty empowering and some of the words being pretty sloppy.
It's just interesting the concept that for Innies you don't need a book with Leviticus level storytelling to be able to push an Innies thought process and beliefs a certain way, which could highlight some of the key differences between most Innies and Outties. Which leads me to my next point. Another scene we got this episode was a scene with Innie Dylan finally meeting with his Outie family. But there was many layers to how this scene played out as a whole. So we see that Dylan is brought to a new family visitation center, which in my head originally was just a manipulation tactic. See, the family visitation center is actually being held within the same room that he did the overtime contingency plan, which, given how huge the building is and how many of those rooms haven't been set up fully yet, I could only assume was done deliberately. I don't think they were lacking in space and this was the best place they could do it, especially considering the electronics it would go to man all those buttons in operation. This would have been a very expensive adjustment to make within the building as a whole. Now, originally, I couldn't really piece together what their grand plan could be. I thought maybe she could have been there to keep Dylan submissive to Lumon as a whole. But then I came across a theory that belonged to a channel that goes by @Nika. Basically, within this video, she was breaking down a lot of her theories in regards to episode 3, but she highlighted Lumon's family visitation plan in regards to saying that Lumon's grand goal could be to slowly integrate Innies into the outside world and see if they could create full, everlasting, dedicated workers. Now, if Lumon's grand plan is to slowly incorporate any versions of the severed folk into the outside world, where would this leave who is in control of the body as a whole? From the scenes we got in this episode, it seems to set up the fact that Outie Dylan's wife could potentially be falling for the more positive attributes that Innie Dylan seems to represent. Whatever emotions, trauma, and life experiences has bogged down Outie Dylan has eventually weighed on their relationship as a whole. Just in regards to seeing the reaction that she has between each version of Dylan, you can see that there is some narrative setup for a sort of love triangle or conflict as a whole. But this wouldn't be the first conflict we've seen between a severed person and their Innie and Outie versions of themselves. See, Helly was one of the first examples we got of what would happen if you had a severed employee who had two differing opinions on the idea of being severed as a whole. And though there's been debate this season on whether the Helly we're seeing is actually the Outie version of her named Helena, a member of the Egan family, I think there's been given enough context to know that the Helly Helena character is setting up a big divide between Innies and Outties. And in this grand war of Innies versus Outties, I'm thinking Dylan's gonna know which side he's gonna choose. That leads me to an even bigger question. If Lumon is using this whole little process to experiment and test if they can actually incorporate an Innie version into the Outie world without anybody noticing, why would they choose Dylan as the prime candidate for this experiment? Especially considering they need him to be working at Lumon in order to keep Mark complacent enough to finish Cold Harbor. See, if this relationship persists between Innie Dylan and his Outie wife, who's to say he won't want to spend all of his time with them? And if he wants to spend all of his time with them, who's to say he'll still want to work at Lumon? And that could cause a huge conflict in regards to Lumon needing Dylan around so that Mark has a reason to kind of keep working for them as a whole. Now, to be fair, this could potentially not be anything worth worrying about, considering Mark's going through reintegration as we speak, and the reintegration as a whole in my opinion, is either going to be completely successful and Mark is going to be able to live as both versions of himself, maybe throughout the rest of the story, suffering glitches or flashes between existence, or he's going to reach a conflict within himself. That body is going to have to choose whether they want Innie or Outie to retain control. This theory mainly was prominent when I thought reintegration would happen towards the end of the season, but the fact that it happened this early means anything could really happen. Anyways, this is just a quick little video I wanted to throw together, and I plan on around the middle of the season breaking down a lot of the craziest theories I've heard in my own comment section. So if you want to, feel free to place them down below, and I'll go ahead and incorporate the best ones I could find in my mid-season video. Again, shout out Nika, her theory video was great, and I really like the concept that Lumon could be using Dylan and his family visitation aspect to see if they could integrate Innies into normal society. So if you want to see more theories similar to that, definitely check her out. And if you guys have a second, I'd like to just get a little personal with you just about the channel. I again seriously appreciate all the support. I 1 month's time did not even fathom the idea that I could actually be at 300 subscribers so quickly. You never really know when you create something or you spend a good amount of effort or time on something, it's actually going to give you the feedback that you expect or can even anticipate. But the feedback I've gotten on this channel is great. We're getting so close to 500 subscribers that I'm actually considering taking more time to put into my videos as a whole. It's really hard to juggle between life balances and content creation as a whole, but the feedback has proven that maybe this is something worth investing a lot more time in. Either way, I'm thankful for the feedback I've gotten altogether. So appreciate everybody who decides to get involved. Again, any support is super appreciated. And remember to have faith in yourselves out there. If you have any passions or dreams that you've knocked off just because you don't think you're capable, maybe just push a little bit and just give yourself a shot, because you really never know how it's going to turn out or who's going to be listening. So again, we got the rest of Severance, we got Yellow Jackets, we got Last of Us, and we got Invincible coming up. I'm excited to be doing a lot more storytelling coverage here on the channel, and we'll be seeing what kind of videos we can get out. Otherwise, thanks for tuning into this one and sticking around this long. It's seriously appreciated. Have a good rest of your day.